Hi, I'm Abby. I grew out my bangs for this, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the who, what, when, where, why, and how do I feel about classic albums in my collection. If 30-minute episodes aren't your thing, don't worry. I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds here on my channel, over on my Instagram, as well as TikTok. Welcome everyone to week 2 of the revamped Woodstock mini-series, where I'm examining the cultural impact of 3 days of peace and music. Part 1 was a revamped film and soundtrack review of Woodstock, which will be linked somewhere around here. For Part 2, we simply must revisit the album bearing perhaps the greatest written commentary on that fateful weekend. Yes, revisited. I was just way too green the first time around. This week's album is Joni Mitchell, Ladies of the Canyon. Congrats to those who guessed this one. Remember, if you want to play along, all you gotta do is check out my community tab. That's where I post my hints to what next week's album is gonna be. I host polls where sometimes you get to pick what's on the show. I make announcements when I'm places that aren't here, like my podcast, which posts a new episode every other Friday. You can find all of those extras on my channel. Alright, let's take the plastic off. I actually have 2 copies of Ladies of the Canyon. The one with the cover I got at a Newberry Comics. The one without is where things get interesting. Years ago, I thought I inherited a copy of Blows Against the Empire. Pretty cool, was pretty jazzed about it. I have kind of a thing for Paul Kantner. We are both absolutely weird, glasses-wearing blondes geeking out over science fiction. We're just on the same wavelength, you know? Anyway, I crack open this copy of Blows Against the Empire, and instead of my Blows Against the Empire, I have a Ladies of the Canyon and 1/2 of Grateful Dead Skull and Roses. So if anyone's got just the second disc, or maybe a spare cover of Skull and Roses that they're willing to let go of, or I don't know, maybe a Blows Against the Empire, let me know. Enough about my vinyl collecting misadventures, let's talk about this cover art, bearing illustrations by Joni Mitchell. For the front cover, she drew a self-portrait. This was not her first self-portrait album cover, and far from her last. But this one's different. Look at all this negative space. This cover is quite sparse, not much more than free-handed line work. It's not so sparse that we can't recognize it as Joni, though. She chose to render her long, stick-straight hair, thin eyebrows, and prominent cheekbones. The most detailed part of the composition is Joni's skirt. In the folds of fabric, she chose to draw the view from her Lookout Mountain home. I believe this was the view from her kitchen window. Yes, this is the window that Henry Diltz photographed her in. On the back cover is a quick doodle of ducks with the track listing. According to Joni in the 2020 documentary Laurel Canyon, A Place in Time, the ducks lived in her neighbor's pond, which she could see from her dining room window. Opening up the gatefold, we have lyrics written in Joni's handwriting, and, you guessed it, more ducks. Ladies of the Canyon is a strange cover to me. It's always read as unfinished, kind of like those big paintings the masters started, but couldn't finish. I'll include some examples here. On Ladies of the Canyon, we of course have the Lady of the Canyon, Joni Mitchell, on vocals, guitar, keys, and serving as principal songwriter. Accompanying her are Paul Horn on woodwinds, Jim Horn on sax, Milt Holland on drums and various percussion, Teresa Adams on cello, and special guests, the Lookout Mountain United Downstairs Choir. You might know them better as Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young. Ladies of the Canyon was produced by Joni Mitchell with Henry Louis. Roll transition. To get into this week's album, I first need to give a little history lesson, because without the Laurel Canyon artist community, Ladies of the Canyon simply would not exist. For Christ's sake, this album's title is Ladies of the Canyon. The first generation of the Laurel Canyon artist community existed from the mid-60s to about the early 70s. Artists liked it because it was A, cheap, B, secluded, and C, convenient, close enough to places like the Troubadour, the Sunset Strip, and the Hollywood studios these guys would record at. And D, it was just a really pretty place. We saw this with the historic American artist communities in Cornish, Cape Ann, Old Lyme, Connecticut. Artists are inspired by nature, and Laurel Canyon had that. Famous Laurel Canyon residents included the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, Stephen Stills' roommate Peter Tork, and the rest of the Monkees, the Doors, Love, the Mamas and the Papas, the Turtles, Carole King, Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys frequented the area too. Frank Zappa's log cabin was in Laurel Canyon. Captain Beefheart, the GTOs, and other staple acts of the LA freak music scene frequented the Zappa residence. That cabin was on Lookout Mountain, where Joni Mitchell also lived. Joni bopped around New York for a minute first. There, she had a fling with Leonard Cohen, who she met at the 1967 Newport Folk Festival. The gallery, Off Clouds, might be about Leonard, but Joni herself confirmed that Rainy Night House, off Ladies of the Canyon, is about him. Quote, "I went one time to his home and I fell asleep in his old room, and he sat up and watched me sleep." David Crosby of the Byrds, or was of the Byrds, this was around the time he got thrown out of the band, and manager Elliot Roberts brought Joni out to California for the first time to record her debut album, Song to a Seagull. In late 1968, she bought her home on Lookout Mountain with the royalties from Seagull. Alright, before we continue down the romantic relationships rabbit hole, I have to give a little more context to Ladies of the Canyon. This record and the one before were recorded in very rapid succession. What sets her first few albums apart is that they pulled from her massive back catalog of songs. She recorded Urge for Going to potentially include On Seagull. Both Sides Now was the closer of Clouds. Ladies of the Canyon, I believe, was the last album for a long time to make use of this practice. Ladies of the Canyon closes with an old Joni tune. She wrote it in response to something her old friend Neil Young wrote. They'd known each other since way back, since the days of the Toronto folk scene. In 1964-ish, he wrote a song called Sugar Mountain, lamenting the end of his teenage years. He was too old to get into his favorite club. He couldn't hang out with his friends or his girlfriend there. Oh, boo-hoo, my life is over. Joni was like, damn, man, what are you, like 20 years old? Don't be so down on yourself. You're not over the hill. She wrote the Circle Game to cheer Neil and herself up. As you can see, Joni has been part of the Crosby, Stills, and Nash-averse since before Crosby, Stills, and Nash existed. In fact, she introduced the rest of the CSN guys to Elliot Roberts. Her relationship with Cros didn't last after Seagull, see that song about the Midway, but another relationship blossomed. In March of 1968, Joni met Graham after a Holly's gig in Canada. As the story goes, his tour manager introduced them, they shared a laugh over a broken music box Joni had found. I don't know why she'd have a broken music box backstage. They met again at a party Cros himself threw a few months later, and that was it. For Graham, it was nothing short of love at first sight. Or second sight. Graham moved into her Lookout Mountain place, where they'd share a year of domestic bliss with their fireplace, 2 cats, stained glass window, and a certain vase. Joni made friends with her neighbors, like Trina Robbins, who wears her beads, Annie Burden, who may bake some brownies today, and Estrella Barracini, wrapped in songs and shawls. Who were Graham and Joni's next-door neighbors? Canned Heat, of course, until their house burned down. There's a joke to be made there somewhere. Speaking of canned heat, in the summer of 1969, around when Graham and Joni were considering marriage, Canned Heat, Graham's new act, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and 30 other groups were invited out to some fucking farm in Bethel, New York that August for a festival, though Joni had every intention of attending Woodstock, and probably would have been a special guest during Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young's set. Her manager correctly predicted the massive traffic jam, but somehow didn't remember helicopters exist, and insisted she not go. She instead appeared on the Dick Cavett Show that Monday with Cross, Stephen Stills, and Grace Slick of Jefferson Airplane. Grace washed her hair and scrounged up a change of clothes, but I'm pretty sure CNS are still wearing the clothes they wore to Woodstock.
This is a song for my man and a song for the moon. Well, he is my child, he is my father.
Joni saw the news reports on TV of the crowds and the traffic jam and heard a little bit about what the festival was like from Graham, and she wrote a song. She imagined herself walking along the procession of abandoned cars and meeting a young man.
And I asked him, I said, where are you going? And this he told me.
He said, I'm going on down to Yasgur's farm. The track listing of Ladies of the Canyon goes as follows. Doing pigs at karaoke would make, not kill the vibe. Correct! I like the way you think. Opening up side 1, we have Morning Morgantown, followed by For Free. Then Conversation. Next, the title track, Ladies of the Canyon. Then Willie, and closing out side 1 is The Arrangement. Opening up side 2, we have Rainy Night House, followed by The Priest. Then Blue Boy. Next, Big Yellow Taxi. Then Woodstock, and the album closes with The Circle Game. Ladies of the Canyon was released in April of 1970, just before Michael Wadley's Woodstock documentary splashed onto the big screen. Reprise's press release for the album, simply titled Joni Mitchell, Enough Said, made a bold statement. Quote, "It used to be in these ads for Joni Mitchell albums, we'd have to get tricky and sly and cute, under the assumption that that was the only way an ad could make you remember Joni Mitchell. No more. By now, you know she's made 2 beautiful albums. Self-titled, Seagull, and Clouds, has won a Grammy Award for Clouds, has graced countless concert stages here and in England, and has been universally extolled by the media. So you can ignore everything we've said so far today. What you might not know is that she's enlarged her gallery of exceptional recordings by a third. Ladies of the Canyon. After just spectacularly missing the point of Clouds, king of the backhanded compliment, Robert Christgau, seemed to get Ladies of the Canyon. Almost. His wording of, quote, Joni's dependence on piano is really annoying. It implies an instrument is the crutch that props up her singing and writing. And we all know that just ain't it. He does praise her development as an artist, likening it to moving from en plein air to the drawing room, making the transition from folky to folk star. And in retrospect, he does give credit to Clouds for being a major songwriting breakthrough for Joni. Quote, "Both Sides Now was only the beginning, and this album offers at least half a dozen continuations, all in different directions." The year following Ladies of the Canyon's release was quite turbulent for Joni. In the spring, I believe, she left Graham. The relationship broke down for a number of reasons. There's this pervasive rumor they broke up because Graham wanted her to be a housewife. He fervently denies this. Quote, "It was the furthest thing from my mind. I'm gonna tell Joni Mitchell just to cook dinner? Fuck you! No way! Nobody in their right mind would do that." In reality, it was good old-fashioned rock and roll excess that split them up, though a frankly bizarre argument involving Joni pouring her bowl of cereal over Graham might have helped that along. No. David Crosby was having the worst year of his life to date in 1970. To lift his spirits, he went on a sailboat trip from Florida all the way through the Panama Canal to California and brought Graham with him. For all the sunny weather they sailed through, they indulged in some
serious winter sports
and a whole lot of cheating. Upon meeting up with the guys in Panama, Joni was disgusted by Graham's behavior. She accused him of turning into a misogynistic jerk. Things got ugly. She left for Spain, cue the Sand Telegram, and one of the greatest breakup albums ever written. He rebounded with Rita Coolidge, who we have a whole podcast episode on linked in description, and she with James Taylor, cue another greatest breakup album ever written. To say Joni played Isle of Wight 1970 is a technically accurate statement. She played Big Yellow Taxi, as well as The Gallery and Midway Off Clouds. A more accurate statement would be, she saved the whole festival from going to shit. Isle of Wight had all the hallmarks of a potential Altamont 2. Last minute venue change. Said venue operating 300,000 people over capacity. Security pissing off said oversized crowd. And bad acid. Basically, the vibes were rancid. Joni was scheduled to go on night 4, but the organizers threw her on stage hours early. The crowd was having none of it. Some guy was tripping so hard they had to call a doctor. Yogi Joe pulled a Kanye and hopped on the mic. Fed up with the bullshit, Joni pulled out the big guns. A track to be included on her upcoming LP. Isle of Wight was so stunned by A Case of You that they settled down. And they stayed that way. Joni padded out the rest of her set with certified bangers. California, Deep Cut Hunter, and Both Sides Now. Things were looking real dicey there, but by all accounts, Joni saved Isle of Wight from descending into a riot. I've made a habit in my folk album videos of mentioning significant covers of their material. Ladies of the Canyon produced several songs now considered American standards. Big Yellow Taxi has been recorded just under 600 times. The Circle Game was covered by Tom Rush and disgraced folk singer Buffy St. Marie. Her version appears in the Quentin Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tori Amos recorded Circle Game, as well as Carrie Belafonte. Annie Lennox of Eurythmics recorded the title track, and yeah, I stand by my point from the original video that Counting Crows' Big Yellow Taxi is terrible. If there were ever a soundtrack for the parking lot that Paradise was paved over for, it'd be that steaming early 2000s corporate soft rock garbage. And Bob Dylan, I love you, but your cover was bad. Great Uncle at a karaoke bar, bad. You want a Ladies of the Canyon cover that actually respects where the original came from? Try Lana Del Rey's For Free, featuring Zella Day and Joan Baez Sound Like Wise Blood. Oh, I forgot Lana, I'm so sorry, Mother. Mother, I'm sorry. Lana's For Free doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it captures the charm of Ladies of the Canyon. Jazzy roots, pretty harmonies, muted production. It reflects the isolation of Fame, which A, displays a shred of competence regarding the lyrics, and B, comes from an authentic place. Lana knows the isolation of Fame. We know very little about the inner workings of that woman's life. We know only what she wants us to know. And that's for very good reason. I have a whole video about how that authored her Ocean Boulevard LP. The cover of my edition was no doubt inspired by the Ladies of the Canyon art. As for Woodstock, it was covered by other artists who didn't attend, see Matthew's Southern Comfort, but the most popular rendition by far was recorded by a certain quartet of boys. In fact, those boys are on this very album. What do I think of Ladies of the Canyon?
We are stardust. We are...
Going in, one big thing has changed since the last time I covered Ladies of the Canyon, and no, it's not me learning how to do my hair and makeup. The last time I covered this album, Joni's catalog was off Spotify.
AD, this is a physical media show. Why are we talking about streaming
Because point blank, no one is bigger than streaming. Not you, not me, not even Joni Mitchell. For those 2 years, Joni's catalog was yoinked from my streaming service of choice. I'll admit, her work was off my radar. I had to go out of my way to listen to it. While yes, that allowed me to expand my music tastes a little and discover new favorite groups, I lost out on some critical years of my young adulthood with the songwriter who helped me transition into young adulthood. I think the big reason Ladies of the Canyon isn't held in as high regard as its siblings is because it's an album at war with itself. Is it Joni the pop star or Joni the secluded artist shrouded in mystery? Is it ingenue Joni or a more mature Joni? Is it deeply personal and confessional like the album to follow? Or is it an attempt to be a generational spokesperson? Is it stripped back like the previous 2 records, or is it a more done-up affair? It makes for some really jarring tonal shifts that I'll point out in the track-by-track breakdown. I also want to identify this is the first piano-forward Joni record. She translates her guitar style with lots of alternate tunings, modified chords, and modes to the piano. It's interesting to note that that distinct playing style came out of necessity while piano didn't. Joni knows how to do a great album opener. I Had a King, All I Want, Help Me, and Coyote are all-timers. Tin Angel is good. Morning Morgantown is one of the weaker openers of this first decade of Joni's discography. It's a nice song, heavy on the romanticization of small-town life, waking up with the sunrise, hearing the milk truck in the morning. Good old-fashioned porch sitting with sweet tea and lemonade. Very much in keeping with the Americana trend of the 70s. I mean, hello, I'm literally wearing a dress made from a Gunny Sacks pattern. But that sweetness is a problem, I fear. The last album's opener, Tin Angel, was quite dark in atmosphere, and its closer, Both Sides Now, was wise beyond a 21-year-old Joni's years. Morgantown, Here and Now, on a 1970 Joni album, feels like a regression. Not to mention, we had this same idea, Mourning in an Idyllic Community, on the last record, and Chelsea Morning is better. Morgantown is also quite heavy-handed with homey, whimsical instrumentation. Dainty acoustic guitar, clop-clopping woodblock percussion meant to invoke a clock or maybe a trotting pony. Joni made a lot of noise about being typecast as a folk Disney princess. With a step back like this, she wasn't helping herself. The first jarring tonal shift is from Morgantown to For Free. Morgantown is all about the simple life. For Free is about being an out-of-touch celebrity living the high life. The narrator sleeps in nice hotels, goes shopping for jewels, rides in limos, has bodyguards, and admits she only plays for a pretty penny. I have to say, the narrator of For Free is positively unlikable. Then she sees a busker playing his clarinet on the sidewalk. She only sees him. She doesn't stop. Though our narrator and busker both share a love for the art, they are both performers, one has lost the passion. The other doesn't care if he makes a penny, though it would be nice if he made $1. He'll play his best for anyone willing to hear, regardless of if they have the money. For Free is about forgetting where you came from, then experiencing something that makes you remember. Michelle Phillips said something in the Laurel Canyon documentary that resonated with me. She was talking about moving out of the canyon to live in Bel Air, and said something to the affect of, we were rich hippies. We were the establishment. As we get into 1970, the guys from the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, the Mamas and the Papas, they were all rock star rich now. They were no longer the counterculture, they were the out-of-touch celebrities. With that context in mind, I don't interpret For Free as being from Joni's point of view. It's from the point of view of this generation of artists forgetting their roots and drowning swing in rock and roll excess. Does the arrangement feel a little pretentious to me? Yes. The piano part is quite stately, the cello is too, but it feels very Velvet Curtain concert hall. So it works. It's another artistic transition for Joni. I appreciate Paul Horn's clarinet solo at the end. It gives a lot of character to an otherwise cold tune. I know I literally just called Morgantown a regression. This is me calling myself out for enjoying the least mature tune on Ladies of the Canyon, Conversation. Our narrator is very clearly being led on. Her affair with this guy is very clearly transactional. Nevertheless, she wants to free this guy from his no good, terrible girlfriend. Officer? Yes, right there! That's the pick-me! Conversation suffers from not like other girls syndrome, and to do my due diligence as a modern woman, I have to call that out. Feminism hadn't quite reached the counterculture yet. All that said, this song is a blast. I love it. The melody is absolutely infectious. Joni glides right through it effortlessly. She made expert use of her soprano range. Her delivery is girlish and cheeky. She's got a sense of humor. Punctuating, she speaks in sorry sentences, miraculous repentances, with a deadpan. I don't believe her. For one, that's Joni calling this girl a miserable bitch. And two, it gives you the spectacular mental image of Joni singing through this song with a smile, then making eye contact and dropping that punchline with a straight face. The layered percussion, hand drums, and shakers bring this song to life. At the end, this very young song crosses into all new territory. Everybody, meet Jazz Joni! Flute and saxophone accent her signature bird-like ad-libs. It's the sophistication conversation needs to fly on an album like Ladies of the Canyon. The title track is equal parts Laurel Canyon fairy tale and a sweet ode to Joni's girlfriends, not unlike this book you've been seeing in the B-roll. I had this in my Clouds video too. Joni originally made this book as a Christmas gift for her friends. The music of Ladies of the Canyon is sublime with warbling harmonies and what I believe is a 12-string guitar. We don't hear this texture anywhere else on the record. It's kind of like Joni put hearts and stars next to this one. The subtle cello is a nice touch as well. It gives the composition some depth. She immortalizes each character with such care. Trina, the independent artist who wears beads. Annie, the warm and welcoming homemaker, keeping kids and cats fat and happy with her cooking. And Estrella, the ethereal free spirit. We all know and love these women, even if we didn't know these women. That's what makes Ladies of the Canyon special. After the cozy, comforting title track, Willie plunges us into insecurity. Willie was Graham's nickname in the Laurel Canyon scene, came from his middle name William. This song is no doubt about him. Willie, like the rest of Ladies of the Canyon, was recorded in 1969, supposedly Graham and Joni's happy year. But if the lyrics are to be believed, the seed of doubt poisoned their love long before any booze cruise could. She's mourning their relationship before it was dead. Willie is my child, he is my father, is a bit of a head scratcher. I think what she means is she loves him unconditionally, but it's hard when he swings between rock star man-child and authoritarian. He's inconsistent. I would be his lady all my life. She knows that if they both could commit, they'd stand the test of time. But he can't commit. He psyched himself out, believing that their love is too good to be true, and he gave his heart too soon. From my life experience, I can tell you that the death sentence of any great relationship is having fundamentally different life goals. Both Graham and Joni had been married once before. Joni wanted to marry Graham, but he was hesitant. He cannot hear the chapel's pealing silver bells. Ultimately, Joni recognizes their relationship is moving pretty fast, and Graham is right to have reservations. It's hard to tell when you're in the spell if it's wrong or if it's real. But if he lets his hang-ups get the best of him, he's gonna lose a really good thing. You're bound to lose if you let the blues get you scared to feel. Guilty as charged! She predicted everything on Willie. This song is another new side of Joni that we haven't seen before, raw and deeply confessional. She flirted with it on the damning midway, but Willie's more somber tone just hits different. The arrangement is good. Like, Blue good. I'm serious, this song could have fit on Blue. Tonally, this is piano-driven and downtrodden, like Willie, but in writing, the arrangement is the opposite scenario. It's so shrouded in mystery, so a-specific, lyrics painted in big images that for a long time it was hard for me to pinpoint. Where Willie mourns a doomed relationship before it's ended, the arrangement examines a relationship past its expiration date. The couple that stuck it out, did everything right, had the high-paying job and the flashy lifestyle, but behind the scenes they're miserable. The excess has become mundane. It's haunting. Again, Joni sounds incredible on this, occasionally punctuating the low-rolling piano part with accented ta-tas that whispered, almost taunting, "You could have been more." Make it one of Ladies of the Canyon's more memorable deep cuts. The opener of side 1, Morgantown, was one of Ladies of the Canyon's brightest tunes. The opener of side 2, Rainy Night House, is one of its darkest. I mean, that choral part! It's gothic and high like a cathedral, then almost Gaelic at the end? Holy hell! The intro is a little long for my taste. I feel it affects the song's pacing and story, but I do have to give props to the cello's integration so far on this record. From the jump, there's a sense of uncertainty and maybe hostility, a dark, brooding man left alone with his father's gun. But our narrator comes over to put him at ease, the serene presence. We have two really interesting characters at play here, the innocent singing soprano in the Sunday choir, and the holy man on the FM radio who gave up a cushy life to chase his dreams, or maybe run from his demons. One very clearly has the upper hand in the power dynamic, but both have incredible potential. Staying up all night to see who in the world they'd be, whether that's seeing each other through or seeing through each other. Is Priest low-key a rewrite of Rose's Blue? I'm not sure, but they sound an awful lot alike. These two characters, the priest and his illicit lover, are a bit harder to place. It's a quiet but no less intense journey through forbidden love, the booming timpani adding a sense of urgency to intricate finger-picking guitar. It's hard for me to get into, the priest is a bit impenetrable, but I have to say the line, "He saw me young and he saw me old and he saw me sitting there," goes so unbelievably hard. Blue Boy reads like a proto-Blue era composition, and not in a good way. It's uncomfortably confessional in a way not even Blue was. It's clumsy, like reading a diary. Sometimes in the evening he would read to her, roll her in his arms, and give her his, that's entirely too much information. I was not prepared to hear that. I did not need or enjoy this. I have to point out the boots of Spanish leather reference in the last verse before moving on. Big Yellow Taxi was the big hit off Ladies of the Canyon. I can see why. With a peppy acoustic part, hand drums, shakers, a whimsical little triangle refrain, and positively infectious, invoking a 60s girl group. Big Yellow Taxi comes from a very specific place in time, popular Laurel Canyon hippie haunt, the Paradise, literally being paved over for the parking lot of a big city modern establishment. The Pink Hotel with the boutique and the swingin' hotspot. Though the references are dated, the Paradise is long gone, I had to Google what DDT was. The message holds up. Simply, don't f*** up our planet! You'll miss not having winters and snow. We only have a finite amount of dirt. Do not f*** it up. And if this song speaks to the collective a little too much for your taste, then Joni brings it back down to earth. The narrator wakes up to hear her man packing up and leaving, never to return. You truly don't know what you've got until it's gone. I don't know if it's just my copy or all copies of Ladies of the Canyon, but there's very little space on the grooves between Big Yellow Taxi and the crown jewel of the record, that From the jump, this is not going to be our average happy Woodstock generation anthem. Subdued keys take the place of electric guitars. It forces you to sit down and listen. What makes Woodstock so striking is how dark it is. You'd think an anthem of this utopian event would be lively and triumphant, but it's not. It's a funeral dirge. Sure, you could chalk it up to cynicism surrounding the hippies. I've been critical of the hippies too. But you have to take into account what was going on in California in the back half of 1969 when Joni was recording this album. A week before Woodstock, the Tate LaBianca murders. Once upon a time, Laurel Canyon was a community that left their doors unlocked, and hippies weren't dangerous, they just smelled a little funny. After what happened on Cielo Drive and the surrounding area, everyone was on edge. No one was picking up hitchhikers anymore. John Phillips was a suspect. David Crosby bought a gun. Hippies were demonized in the media. And in December, the Grateful Dead and the Jefferson Airplane tried to put on the Woodstock of the West, Altamont. It was planned horribly, Hell's Angels were hired as security, and in total, 4 people died. Altamont was the very antithesis of what Woodstock was. So when you hear, I came upon a child of God, he was walking along the road, and I asked him, where are you going? And this he told me, I'm going on down to Yasgur's farm, gonna join in a rock and roll band, I'm gonna camp out on the land, I'm gonna try and get my soul free. It reads as a confused young man trying to escape himself, walking in a funeral march to the end of the 60s counterculture. Joni paints them as lost souls. I feel to be a cog in something turning. I don't know who I am, but you know, life is for learning. Yearning for identity in the collective. There's desperation in the cry of as if gasping for fresh air. Dark and haunting, ghostly as her Woodstock is, Joni still sees the beauty. Bombers riding shotgun in the sky, turning into butterflies. I can't help but think of the Air Force planes that drop daisies over the Woodstock crowd. But this line, this is the brilliance of Woodstock. We are stardust, billion-year-old carbon. We are golden, caught in the devil's bargain, and we've got to get ourselves back to the garden. I don't think I'm articulate enough to quite put my finger on it, but Joni observes a karmic bond between the hippies and the beginning of human history. Innocence caught up in a biblical struggle between good and evil, the longing to return to the Garden of Eden. We've been doing this since the dawn of man. Woodstock is one hell of an act to follow. Circle Game tries its best. I have never been too crazy about this one. It feels like the condescending cousin of both sides now. We don't need to give Neil Young a little pat on the head or a consolation prize, Joni. He's a grown-ass man. But it's a sweet effort to midwife a confused child into adulthood. Continued references to the Crosby, Stills, and Nash-averse and markers of the Woodstock generation aside, Ladies of the Canyon is the young adulthood identity crisis personified. It tries to be a lot of things at once. Outgoing, withdrawn, youthful, sophisticated, loud, and quiet, done up and simple. This is a transitional album, but sonically, it's a perfect circle. We journey from day to dusk, the dead of night, and back to dawn again. Existing within those day and night scenes, we have some of Joni's all-time best works. However hard I wish we could, we cannot return to this beautiful place and time. Laurel Canyon in 1969. Through this album, a glimpse at a world and a life in flux, we can only look behind from where we came. Not unlike a certain Circle Game or one of these funny-looking wax things, this album makes revolutions. Weighted and joyous, Ladies of the Canyon makes quiet revelations. My personal favorites are For Free, Conversation, the title track, Big Yellow Taxi, and Woodstock. Remember, if you want to keep up with all of my favorites from all of the Vinyl Mondays, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description. I update it every week. And that's it! That is part 2 of the revamped Woodstock miniseries that was Ladies of the Canyon. What do you think of this album? What do you think of Joni Mitchell? Leave a comment letting me know. I love to hear what you guys have to say about albums that I love. And remember, despite what some guy on the internet has to say, your opinion matters. If you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11 and a new Dolls podcast every other Friday. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!